When I think about this summit, I think it's been really profound. When you look at the people's faces, when you look at the commitment that people have put into this, it's really normalising learning opportunities across multi-jurisdictional boundaries and actually making them happen and doing it on a day-to-day basis and getting on with it. There was a lot of discussion around an idea. This is actually a reality, and it's going to be a reality that influences thoughts and thinking for many, many years.
This trip really gave me the knowledge, and through all this keynote speech and the discussion, I kind of understand why the differences happen. And for example, in China, we keep talking about autonomy, we keep talking about local government should be more transparent, should be caring about people more. But it's actually very difficult in China because the cities have levels and the bigger cities control the smaller cities, and they have more resources and money, while the small cities where our local government lies have fewer opportunities and money to do the project by themselves. So they rely on the big cities. While in Australia, cities are more independent. There is no big city and small cities. In this way, even it's a very small community, they can actually support themselves and they can actually fund their own project. So I think it's very important for ICMA and the city managers from Australia and Denmark and America to understand it's very difficult in China. Maybe the challenges are very similar, sustainability, productivity, but the situation in China, especially for city managers in smaller cities, it's very difficult.
My general impressions of the summit is that it was a wonderful opportunity for the members of our international committee to engage with local citizens as well as government officials in China. We found that many of the issues that we address are being addressed here in China in a much grander and massive scale. But I'm very impressed by the accomplishments of the Yangzhou government and the other local governments in the area, for the innovations that they've had and the quickness that they're able to achieve some of their objectives. I've learned too that we have similar concerns and objectives in sustainability that we can partner to work on together in the future.
I was completely overwhelmed by the level of hospitality and organization that was put into the summit. I think the summit opened many doors to personal collaborations and establishing contacts on a professional and personal level. And the urbanization and economic development in China these days is completely overwhelming. It was incredible to see the speed, how fast decisions were made, and something that you would never see in the United States to this scale and this extent.
So I'm first and foremost very grateful to have been able to attend the summit. The host city, Yangzhou, has been incredibly gracious, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know my colleagues a little better. When you travel with someone, you learn a lot about them, and the friendships that I've made here will last for most of my career, and I will now have colleagues throughout the world and the United States that I'll be able to call on for advice and just to have a friend to call on.
A wonderful lesson from visiting China is the way they've embraced the history and culture with modern economic development. In Australia, we have 40,000 years of history through our Indigenous residents, and we can really learn from China in learning from that and embracing it as part of, particularly in the tourism space. In terms of relations built and contacts made, it's been a great chance to talk to some professors at Chinese universities to talk about setting up global minimum standards, and that's a space that will be exciting and hopefully part of the future learnings around the world as each country learns from each other more and reduces duplication and improves productivity.
that we need to listen to one another and expand the exchange of information across countries. We've learned from our colleagues in Denmark and in Holland that they have really gone down the road over the last 40 years on sustainable issues, and so I think that we can benefit a lot from what they have to teach us in how we can do things better and maybe catch up a little bit where in North America we may be behind in some aspects of energy efficiency and sustainable development.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is always about people. I think for leaders and city managers, they need to understand the people who are working for them. Especially for in 21st centuries, there are going to be a lot of young people willing to engage in community work, wanting to work for the local government. For me, the best leadership is to create a condition for people to perform.
Well, the major challenges for all of us who are in the public administration, public sector space are dealing with these complex, very large interdisciplinary issues. And so we're going to have to figure out how to work through, how do we bring together multi-sector, multidisciplinary action to deal with issues like sustainability, like dealing with the issues of food safety, all of the kinds of things that transcend the boundaries we normally think of will be the biggest challenge for those of us who work in the public sector.
For communities, I believe that leadership challenges really are coming down to questions about what the community is. There's a lot of discussion about, is that your neighborhood, is that your township, city, or is it the whole region? I think that there's lots of important issues, but maybe that's one that doesn't get as much attention, is thinking about what is the community and what are different levels for service delivery, where should decisions be made, where is accountability.
I think sustainable development is the greatest challenge for the coming years. For so long we've been focused on other things in kind of a natural mode, but the scientists are indicating to us that we need to be thinking long term, and if we don't, there are going to impacts that are going to happen, particularly if we do not change the way in which we develop our cities. So China has a wonderful opportunity to perhaps look at some of the mistakes that we've done and not necessarily focus on the negative aspects that we sometimes think are characteristic of China, such as a bicycle economy. We're trying to shoehorn bicycles into our development in North American cities, whereas in China they're coming from that. So maybe they don't have to go down the same roads that we have. And we see in China, in countries such as China and in our own country, that we have to question the way in which we're going to develop with a perspective of thinking of our grandchildren and what we're going to leave behind for them.
I think the biggest challenge for leadership today is really facilitating collaboration amongst cultures, amongst different generations, and that requires significant understanding amongst everybody. There's a significant gap between the Gen Y and the next generation and even the baby boomers, and that alone requires a significant level of understanding.
I think leadership, whether it's political leadership or managerial leadership, is facing a very difficult time, a time of uncertainty, a time where people are concerned about the future as well as optimistic sometimes about the future. And I think that you're going to need a leadership that can connect with people, that can give them a narrative, a story that helps them move into that future with confidence and is able to make bold change, but to take people with you on that journey.
You see, I think the biggest challenge definitely is to involve citizens in the design of the services we produce in the local authorities. Citizens are a resource that we haven't yet learned to involve and benefit from. I think in Denmark we are now trying to digitalize most of our services, and to do this the best way we have to involve the citizens very early in the process to make them formulate for us how to do the best design so they can serve themselves over the net. Situation is in Denmark that we'll be the first country in the world that is only allowed to communicate with our citizens through digital media. There will be nowhere you can show up or you can come and ask your questions. It will only be digital communication.
And to involve the citizen in this design process, that's really a challenge in Denmark, where I come from.
We live in a very rapidly evolving world. Change is the norm. Change happens very, very rapidly. And I think one of the biggest challenges actually is building capacities and creating an environment where people could actually thrive and be successful in a situation of change. That's probably the biggest piece. Global boundaries are changing, a whole range of different philosophies, but at the end of the day it's around quality of life for people and making things better. And the nice thing is that working in local government, we get to do that every single day.
I think the biggest challenges for leadership in the 21st century are to continue to engage the young emerging leaders of our profession and to give them an active role to play so that they feel fulfilled and have the opportunity to grow within their profession. We need to replace a lot of managers as they get older in the profession and are nearing retirement. There's a huge need for up-and-coming professionals with new ideas on sustainability and on leadership. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have.
The biggest challenges we face as administrators in the 21st century is the ability to develop the necessary leadership tools to effectively manage the impacts that urbanization is having today, while at the same time ensuring that we're laying the foundation for our communities to be sustainable over the long haul.
I think great communities are cities well planned and well run that provide for high quality of life in these communities and create a very safe place to live and raise a family. Everything above it is just a matter of choice, would distinguish one community from another.
I think communities need to be vibrant and ambitious. I think they need to utilize all the talents and skills across the whole community. And I think they need to be confident and resilient in facing an uncertain future.
Well, the question around what is community, I think all comes back to people and a sense of place and a sense of connection and a shared vision of moving forward. But it is ultimately around people.
Well, I think part of the reason we came to China is because there are lots of issues that are similar, particularly for local governments, wherever you are in the world. There's a context that's different when you're in a particular country. So, for instance, the issues of sustainability are the issues that have drawn us to China for this regional summit. And we've exchanged from Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the US, and China. What are the strategies they're using? Those kinds of things bring us together because there's similar kinds of questions that people are asking. How you apply those answers need the context of the cultural, historical, and legal structures of the particular country.
The similarities really have to do with areas of service delivery and infrastructure construction and maintenance and those types of challenges. I think they're very similar to what we confront back in the U.S. The differences are rather dramatic. I think just the scale of the urbanization here is quite overwhelming. And when you consider that Yangzhou, a city of 4.6 million people, is considered a medium-sized city in China, it's just kind of overwhelming.
More similarities than differences, and that's a theme I've seen again and again on these kinds of learning trips. We're all interested in building better communities for our people and places that people want to be, that businesses want to invest in, that will stand the test of time. We go about delivering essential services in different ways, but that core belief I think is really the biggest similarity. The difference that I see here is, and it's also a similarity that's a difference, in that I've seen this in other parts of Asia and Europe, and that is the relationship between the federal, the central government, and the local community governments. In the United States, we have a plethora of overlapping levels of government, local governments, jurisdictions that oftentimes have the same responsibilities, sometimes competing responsibilities. And there's a central government or a state government that, you know, sometimes provides advice, sometimes provides rules, never provides money. And in Asia, what I've seen here is there's much more central direction and a unified front. Obviously, that comes with trade-offs. You know, you're not as nimble. You can't adapt to local situations, but you get things done quickly, and oftentimes major projects benefit from that. So, you know, there's trade-offs. There's no, I believe, right or wrong. It's just you have to be aware of these issues and differences and cope with them as best you can.
What is common is that we have to meet the needs of people that just want to live, and they want to live fulfilled and viable lives. There we have a lot in common. The differences begin when we talk about history. We've had 250 years to take advantage of an industrial and then a technological revolution and get ourselves to a level of lifestyle that we enjoy. On the other hand, in China, they've only had 35 years in which they've opened up from a very different kind of country, and urbanization is taking place at a very rapid pace. We're very often intimidated by the examples of the Shanghais and Beijings, which are mega cities, and very, very few cities in the world can relate to that kind of size. But we seldom remember that there are 20,000 municipalities in China whose average population is 11,000. And there we can relate to many other cities of member countries of ICMA, and our membership profile really is not the 1 million population cities, it is ones that are under 100,000. So we really can exchange information and help one another.
It's been very invigorating to see the differences, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other. I've learned that they struggle with the difference between our government systems and city management forms of a government. Their city management profession is significantly different than what we view as city management, and that's been a struggle for us as we communicate, but also a learning experience from both perspectives.
I think the single largest difference that you have between China and the United States is the pace and scale of development. The pace is very rapid, the density of development is very intense. There's nothing in the United States that rivals what's happening here in China. So you have to look at the scale of activities. And in the United States, we're coming up on 100 years of anniversary of ICMA. In Yangzhou here, they're coming up on 2,500 years of being a city. So under the best of circumstances, there's a lot of lessons to be learned by what's happened here in the past. Maybe some of the newer principles that we use in the United States can be applied here for future, but all in all, it's always very educational to see what more mature, experienced communities have done to enrich what we want to do in the United States.
Some of the things I have seen, I can see they try to handle the same kind of issues and problems, but they do it in different ways. I'm very impressed the way they work, but I must admit that the challenges are very huge for them. But the most and the best impression I have had at all is to see how eager they are to do changes, to cope with the issues that they have to cope with, and they do it in transparency and very open. They are ready to talk about how to do this the best way, how to handle things, and they ask for solutions. How do you do in your country, and do you have experience in this field? And they are very good communicating.
If I think back 20 years and was asked to describe the similarities and differences between sort of Western forms of government and China, I would probably describe quite a significant difference. When I look at the environment today, I think the West has learnt from China, China's learnt from the West, and you're seeing a merging of ideas and best practices evolving. And so people are actually saying, what's the best way to do it? Not, this has to be a particular way. And so I think there's a lot of, real significant similarities in terms of the issues that are being discussed, in actually terms of the actions that are actually taking place. The triple bottom line is really important for all countries now. Raising the level of standard of living for people is really important for all countries. And so I think you're just sort of seeing there continues to be an absolute unique characteristic from each of the countries, but there is a merging of ideas.
I think there's actually quite a few similarities between the issues we're facing in California and in other local governments throughout the United States and what I've seen here in China. It's been one of the surprising pieces of coming to the summit and visiting with China. For example, when we went to the low carbon demonstration project here in Yangzhou, you can see the issues of scalability and cost and how do you move and continue to build these projects in your communities, and that issue is being faced here in China as well as in the United States. And I think as managers, as our communities become more and more diverse, the value of understanding diverse communities and different cultures I think is very important and something that we need to continue to work on, and these study tours to different countries will help managers gain an understanding of some of those cultural differences as well as the similarities.
I think transparency and decision making, accountability for official actions, and continuous commitment to honesty and integrity in all of our personal and professional transactions.
I would say that number one in that is leadership. Leaders need to step up to the plate, not in an autocratic way, but in a way in which they cast a vision to their community as to where we need to go in the future for the long-term benefit of all of our members. The second would be transparency, making it very clear to our communities how the decisions are made, how we want to hear their opinion and include their visions in the decisions that are made. And third is just communication, excellent communication to all levels of our constituencies as to why we're doing what we're doing, and once again listening to them and what they have to say about the jobs that we are doing.
Transparency at all. And to use the big data, we have a lot of data in our local government. We need to involve citizens in the way we use these data. There are, again, a hidden resource in the public, in the residents in our local area. If you present to them the data you have in the administration and ask them to work with it, you can create new solutions, better ways, see new angles, and improve our services. So, well, we are there to serve the citizens, not to serve ourselves. So you have to listen to them. That's a challenge, to involve the citizens, to do it in transparency, and to listen to them and take their advices and decide.
The world's getting a smaller place, and with IT and technology, the opportunity for us to learn from each other better. Every country is doing something that's fantastic, but not all of us don't know that. So the role of ICMA and the role of professional leaders or professional managers and political leaders is just to help us learn more from each other. And so the greatest challenge, I think, is around the setting of some minimum standards or framework. And in local government, ICMA's in a wonderful position for us to work on setting up some global minimum standards for local government, owned by local government, that will help countries learn from each other, reduce duplication, and also improve productivity, which is a major current global challenge for us all.
Transparency, transparency and transparency. The nice thing about working in local government is that it is a dialogue with our citizens. It is about building great cities, great communities, and it's an open dialogue, but it is also about making decisions. So a very transparent process, making decisions and making decisions for the right reasons.